Hello everybody, welcome to Calls. This is the 2023 Honda Classic Data Dive Show. We have a lot to get into. There have been quite a few field changes, so let me cover those very quickly for you. The 4 field changes that I have seen so far. We mentioned Sam Ryder last night, but Sam Ryder has withdrawn from the Honda Classic. David Lipsky, Patrick Rogers, and Lonto Griffin are the 4 players that I have noticed so far that have withdrawn from the Honda Classic. So make sure you alter your rankings, your early rankings this week. You alter your expectations or anything to that effect. Those 4 players have withdrawn, and I will make sure to remind you throughout the show of those withdrawals. I also posted some research to Instagram and to Twitter earlier today, so we're going to start the show off a little bit different this evening. So I'm looking forward to that, but as always, we are going to cover everything PGA National and Honda Classic, see if we can't find the most important metrics for previous winners and see what we want to focus on this week. So let's get into it. All statistics provided tonight and every night are from fantasynational.com. It is simply the best tool out there for your money. It's going to make you a much smarter gambler, much better DFS player. Go check them out. It's well worth your investment. In the description to the video, there are links to all of my social media, the aforementioned Twitter and Instagram, where I posted quite a bit of research earlier today. There were 14 players that qualified under 3 specific criteria that matched every single winner of the Honda Classic going back to the 2016 edition. And in addition to that, because Instagram doesn't limit me to 140 characters, or at least not yet, over on Instagram I expanded on that a little bit, and I was able to narrow down the list to 3 if you factor in a few other criteria that 6 of the 7 previous winners of the Honda Classic share in common. So looking forward to that. If you know the answer to the research or the trivia, feel free to join me in chat. But the link to Twitter and Instagram is there if you want to see that research. And then the link to my Twitch channel is also in the description. This is where the research comes from. I do a lot of deep dive analysis on previous week's tournaments, the winners, the course, everything to that effect. I also critique my lineups from the previous week and all of that. And Twitch is also where I'm going to do a lot of my baseball content, gaming, all of that. So if you're interested in that content, give me a follow over there as well. And then finally, we're live. Chat is open. As I've mentioned, if you know the answer to the trivia question earlier today, or if you think you can narrow down to the 3 perfect qualifiers, then jump into chat. What are you looking forward to for the Honda? Have you made any wagers? I certainly fired off quite a few wagers today. This is a wide open tournament with really only 2, maybe 3 big names, so it's looking like a fiasco of bombs this week in the outright wager market. So we'll see if I am on the right trail with that. But hopefully you are able to join me in chat, make it a fun and interactive show. But let's dig into the data for the 2023 Honda Classic. And as I mentioned, we're going to start with a little bit different beginning than we normally do on a data dive show. So, as I mentioned over on Twitter, there were 14 players that qualified that matched the 3 criteria that every winner has had since 2016. And these are your 14 players in the field this week that match. And as I mentioned on Twitter at the time, I haven't looked at the odds board since early afternoon, really. None of these players were lower than 65 to 1. S.H. Kim, Michael Kim, Andrew Novak, Dylan Fratelli, Hank Libiota, Ben Martin, Adam Shank, Hayden Buckley, Charlie Hoffman, Joseph Bramlett, Richie Wierenski, Martin Trainer, Brent Grant, and Harry Higgs. Quite an eclectic name or collection of names here. Again, if you want to see the criteria that these 14 players are matching from the previous winners of the Honda Classic going back to 2016, then give me a follow over at social media, Twitter and Instagram specifically. But this is the answer to that question. These are the 14 players that qualify. So again, quite an eclectic name. I fired off 3 or 4 of these names very quickly before I thought their odds would change. Again, I'm just removing the star for the favorite or favoritism here on Fantasy National. That way we can move about without that distraction, or at least it'd be distracting on my end. So I wanted to start the show with that, since I had gotten a little bit of interaction on Twitter, especially asking who the 14 players were. So as promised, there they are. But the first thing that we're going to really cover in depth is we're going to go to Windfinder. And we noticed last night that wind can be a factor here at PGA National. So I went ahead, brought up Windfinder. As of right now, and again, this is still 2.5 days away. Nothing reliable as of yet. There does appear to be a little bit of wind in the forecast for Thursday. Friday looks pretty calm, and then picks up throughout the weekend. Sunday looks to be like it could be pretty windy. But as of right now, we do have a little bit of wind in the forecast. So I will close that out, and you'll see that I have the timeline set to the beginning of 2022. And I've got moderate and windy checked here as far as filters. So your top wind players since the start of 2022 have been Sungjae, Shane Lowry, Chris Kirk, Aaron Wise, Matt Kuchar, Alex Noren, Billy Horschel, Christian Bezaidnout, Brandon Wu, and Denny McCarthy. So make sure you give these players some extra consideration early on in your research this week, as there does appear to be a little bit of wind in the forecast for the Honda Classic this year. However, the most important factor, I truly believe, will be when rounds are difficult. The Honda Classic has traditionally been very difficult throughout the years. Sorry, wrong tab. We'll move to this one. There was one round of average last year, average difficulty, but every single round going back to 2018 before that had been difficult. So I really think that that's going to be the narrative this week, as it generally is for the Honda Classic. So your top performers in total performance when a round has been difficult since the start of 2022 have been Sungjae, Shane Lowry, Aaron Wise, Chris Kirk, Tyson Alexander, Eric Barnes, Brent Grant, Billy Horschel, Adam Shank, and Lee Hodges. Good evening, P. Glad you could make it into chat this evening. It was good to catch up with you a little bit on social media. I made sure to shout you out last evening, but for those that might not have seen last night's show, congratulations to P on a successful week in DFS this past week at the Genesis. We're going to see if we can't continue our winning momentum. Me personally, I am on 4 straight positive returns in a row, 4 straight weeks of positive returns. However, last week's was all in wagers, which was surprising to see, at least for me, considering how well I was set up Friday evening. But I'll take positive return on investment any way I can. But congratulations again on your successful week, P, and we'll see if we can't keep it going. If you missed the intro, I gave the 14 players, or I started the show with the 14 players that qualified under the criteria that I put forth on social media. So if you missed that, make sure you catch the beginning of the show, the stream, when I go offline as the 14 players are revealed. But here are your top players when it's been difficult. And again, PGA National has just been difficult since 2018. Really, historically, there's been a year or two where you might have a round of average, but generally speaking, it has been difficult every single round. The majority of your winners score between -8 and -10. So not a lot of high scores or -17s, 18s, 20s, all of that. This is a very, very difficult tournament. 15 holes with water in play is just a brutal test for golf. So we looked at some wind metrics. We looked at difficult. The only other thing that I would like to cover that we looked at last night, two things actually. We can look at short course metrics as well as PGA National. Although it is a par 70, measures to 7,125 yards. So by definition, a short course, but it is a longer par 70 to be fair, but still designated as a short course. So your top performers on short courses, defined as less than 7,200 yards, since the beginning of 2022, have been JT Poston, Ben Griffin, Thomas Detry, Denny McCarthy, Sungjae Will Gordon, Matt Kuchar, Eric Van Rooyen, Chris Kirk, and Adam Svensson. I skipped Lonto Griffin. He has withdrawn from this week's Honda Classic, along with Patrick Rogers, who sits in 12th. David Lipsky and Sam Ryder have also withdrawn, so make sure you make notation of that. The last little bit of review, if you will, I do want to look at some Bermuda putting, specifically on fast and lightning Bermuda greens. So we will keep the same timeline. The beginning of 2022, we'll have plenty of rounds, as Denny McCarthy has upwards of 40, and majority of players have 15 or more, which will be plenty. So your top performers on fast and lightning speed Bermuda greens since the beginning of 2022: Martin Trainer, Brian Gay, Harry Hall, Sepp Straka, Denny McCarthy, Alex Noren, Adam Long, Doc Redman, Ben Taylor, S.H. Kim, and Zach Johnson. That might be 11. I might have lost count. But Sam Ryder is withdrawn, so I skipped him. But there's your top performers on fast and lightning Bermuda greens. And these greens have traditionally been at least fast, and they have crept into lightning a few times in the past couple of years, including being lightning speed every round last year. But with that, I believe that is everything that I would like to cover in terms of an overview or your strokes gained page view. You are absolutely well within your realm to look at Jack Nicklaus courses, but with so few courses on the PGA Tour that are Jack Nicklaus designs, and knowing that I'm not going to do anything specific with Jack Nicklaus the filter for the mixed condition model, I'm not going to cover that. But you are well within your reason or purview to check Jack Nicklaus courses if you are indeed a member of Fantasy National. And I did look at the top performers on Jack Nicklaus courses last night in the initial research show. So if you are interested in that, you can find that in last night's show. the most boring golfer wins the Honda. Generally speaking, that is correct because this tournament is so difficult. Fairways and greens and pars are just great scores here. They're not good scores, they're great scores here. So boring golf generally does very, very well here. And bogey avoidance is going to be a big factor again this week, as well as double bogey avoidance, I believe. But we have plenty of time to get into that. So let's move on over to the prior leaderboards, as there's a lot that I want to cover this evening. So we look at the strokes gained total, and it was a little confusing last night because when you looked at the course breakdown, the off the tee did outweigh around the green by a significant margin, but it wasn't really all that important. And yet when we went to Microsoft Excel and looked at the players that have averaged a top 40 finish the past 5 years, off the tee was actually a decent factor. It was a decently large number for those players. So I would really like to see how these strokes gained numbers compare when we look at the actual leaderboards from years prior. So looking at last year's Honda, and again, just top 15 due to ties and whatnot, down to Mark Hubbard, we see that we had a couple of players that were negative off the tee, but not by too much. But every single player here is positive in approach. It is just the statistic that matters the most here at PGA National. Strokes gained approach is going to be a significant portion of my mixed condition model, if not the most significant. It's definitely going to be one of them. Quite a few players were negative in around the green. Not necessarily bad in that week, except for maybe Keith Mitchell. But quite a few players were negative. Only one player was negative in putting last year. We look at 2021 and do the same, looking for strokes gained. Again, this is the top 18, just due to ties. Again, few players that are negative in off the tee, only 3, and they're all less than 1 total shot or total stroke off the tee. You had Sungjae that was very, very bad with his irons in 2021, but otherwise, strokes gained approach, a massive factor as well. And putting actually drops a little bit in terms of significance, as 3 players were negative, and 2 of them quite substantially, 2.5 and a 2.1. If we sort on these, decent little correlation here for off the tee. We look at approach. Actually, off the tee looks a little bit more correlating than approach, just looking at the finishes here, because you have several, in the 30s, whereas off the tee, you've got quite a few players that are top 20s and better, top 25s. Interesting to see. Putting, all of your really high finishes, except for the winner in 2021 at least. Let's come back and look at 2022's before I forget to do so, and do the same thing here. So off the tee, again, your winner was the leader off the tee. Now you do have a miscut fairly high up, but some pretty strong finishes here. The approach, honestly, not terribly strong for being strokes gained approach. I've seen this much more direct in its correlation. Putting, and maybe a little bit. Your winner was very high up here. So at least in terms of the leaderboard, strokes gained approach is not doing it justice. But I'm going to tell you, and we saw it at least in last year, every single one of the top 15 was positive in terms of strokes gained approach. So I definitely think strokes gained approach is going to be the main factor. However, off the tee is making a significant push to be considered. And we'll see if we can gather why that is. So let's go to fairways and greens. And last night in Microsoft Excel, we noticed that greens and fairways were actually negative in terms of importance versus full field courses on the PGA Tour. So let's see if we can't gather why that might be, or if it was a little bit misleading. So if we look at last year's leaderboard, you have 4 players that were negative in fairways. You had a couple of players that were negative in greens. However, they were very small in greens in the negative. And I mentioned distance might be a thing here. Again, 109 Brian Stewart, that's pretty high, but across 4 rounds, minus 16 isn't all that much. Matthias Schwab was pretty close to field average. Chris Kirk was pretty close to field average. Distance might be a small-ish factor. And in fact, when you sort on it, your winner is fairly high up on the leaderboard for driving distance. You don't have a missed cut until you come down to Kevin Tway down here. You've got the whole gambit of finishes, anywhere from your winner to clunker made cuts from Peter Uihlein and Curtis Thompson and all that. So a wide range here in terms of your finishes in the driving distance, but you do have a decent set of cut making here. Fairways, you've got a very high missed cut, but your winner was the leader in fairways. So take that for what you will. Good drives, your winner was second in that category. But again, you have another miscut fairly high up. But look at the good drives. That is pretty strong correlation with the exception of Alex Smalley and Danny Willett. And in greens, your tournament winner led in that category. And a whole lot of same correlation like the good drives with the exception of Alex Smalley and Danny Willett. So I don't know if off the tee in of itself is going to be a big factor, but boy, it looks like fairways, good drives, maybe even greens. All of these look like they were pretty big factors last year, especially for your winner in Sepp Straka. Let's take a look at a couple of prior years, see if we can't narrow down any, or if any of these are indeed the most important. And you see here, distance actually, again, you've got some fairly small numbers here in the negative. While they might be negative, they're still fairly small. Distance might be a slight factor if you sort on it. This one's quite a bit less than 2022's. You have Wyndham Clark who missed the cut, and then not as strong success here in terms of distance. Fairways, it's pretty strong up in there, but you don't have your winner very high up. He's a little further down here in Matt Jones. But fairways, somewhat, maybe. Good drives, a lot less than in 2022, as you have 2 missed cuts that are very high up and not nearly the level of upper echelon finishes, top 10s, top 5s, not nearly as many. Greens, your winner's pretty high up. And all of these players, with the exception of Jim Herman, at least were middling. If you go Stricker and above, they all top 25 or better, except for Jim Herman. So, okay. I would say greens is probably leading of all of the categories so far here in the driving and greens page view. A little bit less in terms of distance. You got more players that are negative in the distance, but you have a good run of cut making. Again, your winner's not high up here, but you have a good run of cut making before you hit some missed cuts. Fairways, no correlation in 2020 with fairways. As you can see, all the missed cuts and clunker to middling finishes here. Good drives, a little bit more little bit more correlating than in 2021. And finally, greens. Yeah, look at this. Sungjae, third. I mean, technically tied for second, but we'll say third. Now, you do have a missed cut very high up here, but there's some strong performance in there with correlation in terms of greens. It's not as strong as I would have thought coming into the week with greens and the correlation. But having said that, I still think it is greens in regulation, and it would make some sense. Even though these greens are bigger than the tour average, they're much more difficult to hit. Less than 60% greens in regulation for the field here at PGA National. So that would tell me that greens are a significant portion. And that's why I also think distance might be a slight factor. Slight. So when you come back to the field, or this year's field, and go to the fairways and greens page view, I'm going to go ahead and straight put this on difficult. I am very confident that the Honda will be difficult again this year. So let's take a look at a few metrics here when a round is difficult. Let's first start with greens and regulation. So since the beginning of 2022, when a round has been difficult, your top greens and regulation gained players in that time frame have been Shane Lowry, Sungjae, Adam Schenk, Billy Horschel, Lee Hodges, Thomas Detry, Russell Knox, Johnny Vegas, Hank Lebioda, and Hayden Buckley. Again, skipping Patrick Rogers, he is withdrawn. But there are quite a few names on here that are in the 14 that are from the trivia earlier today. So you can imagine what one of the criteria might be from social media. Again, when looking at scoring difficult to par, let's take a look at some good drives gained. Actually, might be a decent statistic to look at. When a round is difficult, your top good drives gained players since the start of 2022 have been Shane Lowry, Sungjae, Grayson Sigg, Billy Horschel, Danny Lee, Adam Schenk, Chris Kirk, Thomas Detry, Brent Grant, and Adam Long. So quite a bit of overlap here between good drives gained and greens in regulation. Makes a lot of sense since greens is kind of a subset of good drives. But Sungjae and Shane Lowry, 1 and 2 again in the rankings for this particular metric. I imagine that's going to be the case a lot of times. Chris Kirk is top 10 in both. No, excuse me. Chris Kirk is not top 10. It is Adam Schenk, who is top 10 in greens and good drives when it's difficult. Billy Horschel is 4th exactly in both. Russell Knox probably gets an honorable mention, top 15 in both. Brandon Wu, top 15 in both. All right. Something else that I would like to take a look at, especially because scrambling is much less successful, or players are much less successful scrambling here than at the average PGA Tour event. Let's take a look at scrambling when it's difficult. So your top players, when a round is difficult at scrambling, since the start of 2022 have been Aaron Wise, Denny McCarthy, Austin Cook, Bill Haas, Billy Horschel, Sungjae, Matt Kuchar, Christian Bezadenhout, Vaughn Taylor, and Shane Lowry. Skipping David Lipsky, he's one of the 4 that have withdrawn so far. So a lot of different places you can go on this tab. I'm very confident that I'm going to be using some greens in regulation in some way, form, or fashion. I still think that driving distance might be something that we want to look at. So let's take a look at driving distance when hitting fairways is difficult, as hitting fairways has traditionally been somewhat difficult here at PGA National. You see average, difficult, and easy, easy, difficult, and then average. But if we go to the actual course breakdown, finding the fairway has been at 60% here versus about 62% at the average tour event. So not terribly too much more difficult. However, knowing that players are hitting fairway woods and irons and still not hitting greens as much as the average tour event tells you how difficult it is off the tee here at PGA National. So when fairways have been difficult to hit since the start of 2022, your top driving distance players have been Joseph Bramlett, Thomas Detry, Taylor Pendrith, Callum Tarrant, Brandon Matthews, Matthias Schmid, Johnny Vegas, Ben On, Ryan Brim, Adam Schenk, and Will Gordon. All right, so again, a lot of things that potentially we could look at from this tab. And hopefully Microsoft Excel will clarify some of that for us later on this evening. Let's go ahead and move to scoring, birdies and bogeys. I hope I picked the right one. There we go. So we noticed last night that bogeys were far more than birdies gained, but double bogey avoidance was actually a very high percentage compared to the average tour event. So as we can see here, again, from the top 15, we have 3 players that were negative in birdies, only 2 were negative in bogeys. Your winner slightly higher in birdies gained. Let's see, you had Shane Lowry was massive amounts more in bogey avoidance. Bogey avoidance. Bogey avoidance here. Looks like bogey avoidance, if we sort on it, some pretty good correlation here, all the way down to, say, maybe Keith Mitchell or Daniel Berger. You do have one clunker of a made cut in Russell Knox. Brian Gay's middling, and then everybody else highlighted here is a top 30. That's pretty strong, including your winner, who is 3rd in that category. Bogey avoidance, oh my. You do have a miscut very high, but for the players that are really avoiding the bogeys the best, look at this correlation. 5th, 2nd, winner 4th, 7th, 5th. And then a top 30 and a top 25. So for the upper end of the leaderboard, it was bogey avoidance, at least last year. We'll take a look at 2021. And I went to the wrong tab, of course. Birdies and bogeys. Again, your winner much more in the birdies gained than bogeys avoided, which is surprising to see, but facts are facts. We sort on it. Your winner was the leader in birdies gained, but a little bit less in terms of correlation than in 2022, at least very high up. Bogeys avoided, probably roughly the same. And your winner is a little further down, so maybe birdies was more important in 2021. Let's see if we can break the tie, or if things just get as clear as mud from 2020. Again, birdies gained the massive winner in 2020. Your winner, 2nd and 3rd. Okay, that's hard to beat that correlation. Bogey avoidance is very strong, just not with the winner. It's strong correlation overall. Something I haven't done is look at double bogey avoidance. Sungjae's very, very high up here. He actually was better at double bogey avoidance than bogey avoidance. Okay. 2021, I'll just work my way backwards because I forgot to look at double bogey avoidance. It might perhaps be a thing. Fantasy National is having a little bit of tough time telling me that I need to slow down. Yeah, so there's some pretty strong stuff there. Your winner was one of the leaders in double bogey avoidance. And then in 2022, last year, your winner wasn't the leader in it, but he was fairly high up. Okay. Maybe something. All right, so for the players in the field this year, for the Honda Classic. And of course, I'm going to be using the difficult filter. I much prefer using scoring metrics and scoring filters to match. Your top bogey avoiders when a round has been difficult since the start of 2022 have been Shane Lowry, Sungjae, Thomas Detry, Matt Kuchar, Aaron Wise, Martin Traynor, Cameron Percy, Christian Bezadenhout, Trevor Cohn, Tyson Alexander, Adam Schenk, and Eric Cole. So again, another metric here where Shane Lowry and Sungjae go 1-2. Thomas Detry also very, very high up here. Aaron Wise has popped on quite a few of these metrics and filters. Adam Schenk has been up here a few times as well. If you're looking for players that are good at both the birdies and the bogeys when it's difficult, Sungjae's top 5 in both. Aaron Wise is top 5 in both. Honorable mention here to Tyson Alexander and Adam Schenk. They're both top 20 in both metrics, birdies and bogeys. Honorable mention to Lee Hodges, Eric Barnes, they're top 20 in both, as well as Billy Horschel, top 20 in both. But I do think double bogey avoidance might be something. So, your top double bogey avoiders since the start of 2022, when a round's been difficult: Chris Kirk, Denny McCarthy, Sam Stevens, Danny Willett, Shane Lowry, Vaughn Taylor, Johnny Vegas, Ryan Armour, Alex Noren, Christian Bezadenhout, and Brent Grant. So as of right now, I could see myself putting in, maybe 5% in double bogey avoidance. But something else that you would be well within reason to look at, we didn't do it last night, so let's do it tonight. Let's take a look at some scoring metrics when a course is short, since this is a short course. Now, I'm going to be using the difficult filter in the mixed condition model because I prefer to use a scoring metric with a scoring filter. But for those that are interested in short course metrics, your top bogey avoiders on short courses since the start of 2022 have been JT Poston, Sungjae, Christian Bezadenhout, Thomas Detry, Eric Cole, Taylor Pendrith, Matt Kuchar, Ryan Armour, Shane Lowry, Ben Griffin. Yeah, and Ben Griffin's number 10. Lonto would have been 11, but he is withdrawn. So there's your top 10 in bogey avoidance on short courses. Top 10 in birdies and bogeys. You got JT Poston. You have Thomas Detry and Ben Griffin. Will Gordon would be an honorable mention for short courses. He's top 15 in both birdies and bogeys. Chris Kirk is top 20 in both birdies and bogeys on short courses. And Denny McCarthy is top 20 in both birdies and bogeys on short courses. And then if we want to look at doubles on short courses, your double bogey avoiders: Denny McCarthy, Brandon Wu, Michael Kim, Matthias Schwab, Alex Noren, Nick Hardy, Zach Johnson, Russell Knox, Aaron Wise, and Doc Redman. So I can see myself using a whole lot of bogey avoidance. Again, I mentioned 5% in the doubles avoided. Birdies gained, at least from the prior leaderboards, looked like it was something. So perhaps this is a week where I do both. Don't know. Definitely nothing to do with eagles, so I won't be doing birdies or better at all. Just eagles are non-existent here at PGA National. All right, let's move to proximity. And last night we noticed that 175 to 200 is the most common approach shot, and Microsoft Excel seemed to think that it also led to a very high amount of correlating success. But let's check these specific leaderboards. So from last year, we'll highlight the top 15 again. For the 175 to 200, once you got past the top 4 here, there was nothing. There's a lot of players in the red. But for the top 4 finishers, it was something. If we sort on each total procs, you got some cut makers in here, but a lot of clunker made cuts, so don't see much here. nothing here. A lot of miscuts and double-digit finishes, so nothing there. Not a whole lot here because of all these miscuts very high in the 100 to 125. 125 to 150, again, a decent little run of cut making, but you've got quite a few high finishes in here as well. 150 to 175 doesn't look strong at all with all these miscuts, these 999s. 175 to 200, not much. And then 200 plus. 200 plus looks like it's been the strongest from 2022. You do have a miscut fairly high, but everybody above him, other than Curtis Thompson, is a middling finish or better. So 2022, 200 plus was the main proximity. Let's take a look at another year or two in terms of proximity. This is the top 18. Now, total prox is a little less important in terms of the overall. But again, a whole lot of red in the 175 to 200. But your two winner, or your first and second place, were very, very good from that range. So, prox total, again, just a decent run of cut making. Nothing screaming a whole lot of correlation. Not a lot here. Not a lot here with all these miscuts. 125 to 150 might be something. I mean, you do have a Nick Taylor miscut fairly high and an Adam Long miscut fairly high, but you're also surrounded with top 15, a top 20, a top 20, top 20, 15, 10, and 15. So, okay. 150 to 175, no. Lots of miscuts and double-digit finishes. And it's okay, I suppose. From the 175 to 200. 200 plus. Not really. And again, I stress it every week, but I will continue to say it. This is the weakest part of my golf analytics is proximity. Graphically, it says that you should focus on the 175 to 200. But from a leaderboard perspective, statistician's mind, it has not played out that way. Now, having said that, I just happened to go to 2020. Look here, only 2 players were negative in terms of 175 to 200 in 2020. Now, is this an outlier year, or is this more of a case of the things that it should have been? Because prox total is something as well for all these players that finished in the top 16. Again, you have a couple of miscuts fairly high up, but hopefully you can understand the much more direct correlation with all these upper end leaderboard finishes when you sort on prox total. Let's look at 175 to 200. Okay, that's fairly strong, other than Sam Ryder and Harry Higgs, but you got a lot of your big time finishes up here again. All right. Microsoft Excel seems to think it's 175 to 200. So I guess that's what we'll go with, but I'm not 100% confident. So we'll take a look at proximity. And again, Fantasy National's just not having a good time so far tonight. Remove the filter there. Let it load. All right, I will bring this timeline in. So since the beginning of the PGA Tour season, so only going back to the Fortinet in 2022 or in the fall, I'll go with total prox and then we'll look at 175 to 200. Your best total prox players in the field this week since the Fortinet have been Russell Knox, Ryan Armour, Justin Suh, Satoshi Kodaira, Paul Haley, Hank Lebioda, Ben Griffin, Dylan Wu, Nick Hardy, and Shane Lowry. Looking at 175 to 200 and total prox, you would have Satoshi Kodaira, 4th in total prox, 6th in 175 to 200. Chris Stroud honorable mention. Zach Blair, honorable mention. I guess Carl Yuan would probably fit there as well. He's top 30 in both. Dylan Wu is 8th in total procs and 12th from 175 to 200. Very strong. Davis Riley, 11th and 16th. Akshay Bhatia, granted only 3 rounds, but Akshay, 17th in total procs, 19th in the specific length. Nick Hardy, Adam Svensson, also honorable mentions. Again, I think it might be the 175 to 200, but I'm not terribly confident at the moment in that. Let's move to par 3s, 4s, and 5s. And of course, I had to hit that. All right, par 3s. Par 3s are going to be a major factor this week. They generally are at PGA National and the Honda Classic. Again, only 3 players in the top 15 were negative in terms of par 3s. Only one was drastically negative. Now, John Hudd didn't play the par 3s well at all. But look at the other 2 players that were negative in terms of par 3s last year. Negative 1/10, negative 1/10. Essentially field average. You look at the specific range of par 3s. It appears to be the 175 to 200, which is what Microsoft Excel was saying last night. So if you sort on the par 3s, not terribly strong last year, but the 175 to 200, decent run of cut making. But I'm pretty confident 2022 for par 3s was an outlier in the negative, or a low outliar. So let's take a look at 2021. You had Christopher Ventura, who missed the cut, but then a whole lot of success. You have to come all the way down to Scott Stallings before you hit another missed cut. And you have, Matt Jones your winner was high up here. Your leader, top 20. Stuart Sink, top 20. So pretty strong here. Again, just taking out Christopher Ventura, who, again, played the 175 to 200s extremely well. And then in 2020, we look at par 3s. Some big numbers again. Sungjae wasn't your leader in that category, but look at this correlation. Once you get to the miscut of Sean O'Haire, nobody outside of T35. You have a second, fourth, third, first, and then a bunch of top 20s. Then you hit Sean O'Haire, who missed the cut. And then some more very good finishes from this group here. And again, the 175 to 200 is the leading strokes gained number here at 4.4 in 2020, and it's been that way the past couple of years as well. So we move to this year's field. Par 3 efficiency. Your top par 3 performers, with no other filters, your top par 3 performers since the start of the PGA Tour season. Those players have been Chesson Hadley, Grayson Sigg, Justin Suh, Nick Hardy, Billy Horschel, Aaron Baddeley, Sungjae, Ben On, Thomas Detry, and Danny Lee. If you scan across to the 175 to 200s, Chesson Hadley's an honorable mention. He's 17th in the specific length. Grayson Sigg is top 10, both in total par 3s and the specific length here at PGA National. Aaron Baddeley would be an honorable mention, 6th and 13th. Sungjae, 8th and 2nd. Ben On, honorable mention, 9th and 16th. Danny Lee, honorable mention. Adam Svensson, honorable mention. Callum Tarrant, honorable mention. Top 20 in both. He's actually the number 1 in 175 to 200. So here is the 175 to 200 par 3s sorted for you in case you are wanting to look specifically at that length. I think I'm going to go with par 3s, although I can see I can see a justification for doing par 3s and separating out the 175 to 200s a little bit, since they are so massive in the number in terms of total strokes gained relative to their par 3s, or relative to the total par 3s. We move to par 4s. Big numbers here. Lowry, Berger, Substraka. Again, you don't find a miscut until you come down to Honorbon Lahiri just off your screen. Some very, very high numbers in terms of par 4s. Not a whole lot of clunker made cuts either. These guys generally performed pretty well last year. 354, 4.8. Looks to be like all or nothing in terms of correlation. You have miscuts along with top 5s and 10s. So 4.8, 7.6, and your winner led that category. And not a whole lot of miscuts either. 5.8, a little bit less in terms of correlation. So at least last year was the 400 to 450. We'll take a look at a couple more years and then move to Microsoft Excel. Par 4s. Again, your winner in total strokes gained par 4, so they're going to be important. You have a 6.3, and your winner was second in that category. 7.5, your winner was third. 5.2. Some decent correlation beyond Nick Taylor. And then lastly, in 2020, oh my gosh. I'll come down all the way. Let's go to here, Vegas at 5.9. None of the top, about 12 to 15 players in 2020 were less than T30 in strokes gained par 4. Wow. You had your winner, third, fourth, 8th. It's very strong. You had an 8.6, although not as strong direct correlation, but 8.6, 9.2, a 2.9. So consistently it's been the 400 to 450 is what I'll say. So going to this year's field, your top par 4 performers since the beginning of the PGA Tour this season: Thomas Detry, Ben Griffin, S.H. Kim, Denny McCarthy, Aaron Baddeley, Hayden Buckley, Matt Kuchar, Aaron Rai, Brandon Wu, Will Gordon, and Chris Kirk. If we want to look at 400 to 450, Thomas Detry, Ben Griffin, Aaron Baddeley, Matt Kuchar are all top 10 in both total par 4s and the 400 to 450. Honorable mentions go to S.H. Kim, Denny McCarthy, Alex Noren, and Eric Van Rooyen, who are top 20 in both total par 4s and 400 to 450s. So give those players some strong looks as you continue your research throughout this week. We're not going to do anything with par 5s. There's only 2 par 5s on the course, and they don't matter. They just don't matter here at PGA National. And I will back that up by going to Microsoft Excel. So let's go ahead and do that. I will bring you to the comparison course for the Honda. We looked at some of these last night off the tee. This is a pretty big outlier. So if you take that out, it starts to be 22% less important. So, all right, maybe one of the years that we saw was a little bit misleading. You have a couple of pretty high numbers in approach, but a low one as well, so they kind of balance out. Approach is going to be pretty big. You got a big outlier in around the green, and you've got a low outlier in putting. So putting seems to be a decent little factor here at PGA National. This is why I thought distance might be something. However, there is a high outlier, but it has been traditionally, somewhat of a factor. Now, removing that high outlier brings it down to less important than the average full field course. If I put the extremely high outlier back in, it goes to 4%. So perhaps that is, perhaps that's been throwing me off, seeing this high outlier when looking at percentages. Very well could be. You've got a very low and a very high outlier in fairways gained, so those kind of cancel out. Good drives, this is a very high outlier. I would remove that, and it's still negative as it is. Greens, pretty consistent in terms of 2 low outliers and 2 high ones. And it's saying that greens is negative in terms of comparison to full field courses, but I still think I'm going to be looking at some greens when it's difficult. I think that's what I'm going to be doing with that. We look at birdies and bogeys and so forth. You see the percentage in double bogey avoidance, very, very high. We scroll across, like the bogeys certainly outweigh the birdies, and we had a very low outlier here. So if you remove that, bogeys become slightly more important. Okay. But double bogey avoidance, this has been a pretty consistent statistic with a low outlier. 70 becomes 71.5% more important. And honestly, it kind of makes sense with all the water in play on this course. If you're able to avoid double bogeys, again, I think double bogey avoidance is going to be something that I'm going to be using in the mixed condition model. And I don't think I've ever used it before, to be honest with you. But I think it could be something this year, especially with this low outlier, and it's been a very consistent metric year over year here at the Honda. Par threes, we saw that, again, last year it didn't really play all that much, but it has in the past. Par threes is saying that it is 31% more important. I can believe that. Look at the 175 to 200, almost double in importance. Almost double. And again, it's fairly consistent in terms of you got a low outlier here, a couple of higher ones here. Yeah. Looks like we're going to be looking at par threes and then probably looking at 175 to 200s on their own. But quite a bit of emphasis in terms of par threes this week. Again, look here, 1.9 for par threes versus a 0.79 in par fives. That is almost a 3 times the importance. Par threes to par fives. Then you look at par fours, you do have a high outlier here. Let's see how this changes. Look at par fours. Yeah, moves it to 3% more important. So I don't think you can ignore your par fours this week. Looks like the 400 to 450. Yeah. Okay, so that's a very low outlier. You remove that, you're looking at 18% more important. Okay, I can get behind that. 350 to 400 looks to be very high, but look at this extremely high outlier. You remove that, it comes down to 30%-ish. All right. Again, this is not a long course. You have 3 par 4s here, 4, 4, and 1 at least on the scorecard. So I'm thinking probably 400 to 450 if I had to take a guess, especially with this low outlier and this high outlier. Talked about par 5s, they just don't matter here. It's been fairly consistent in the fact that it doesn't matter. It just doesn't matter. If there is a length, it's 500 to 550. So if you want to take a look at par 5 performance, I would take a look at the 500 to 550. Proximity, definitely something that I want to look at. And when you compare it to the average full field course, nothing is really standing out except for these 2 ranges here, 125 to 150, 175 to 200. Remember, the most common approach shot is 175 to 200. So it is good to see that at least leaderboard-wise, it's stacking up to be important. You got a very low outlier here. Oh yeah, look at that. Very low outlier. I mean, really, yeah, a couple of low outliers. But if you remove the negative from 175 to 200, it moves to 50% more important. Okay, that really starts to work. We saw that 2022, there was just no correlation. And we saw that there was quite a bit in 2020 so from the leaderboard. So we're seeing that backed up there. 125 to 150, a very high outlier there. And it moves it to just 6.5%. So perhaps we are on to the right course of thinking there with the 175 to 200, especially with this negative or low outlier. And finally, I do want to look at putting, as the majority of birdie putts here at PGA National come from 25 plus feet. However, that's a big number here, and that's a fairly big number there. So if we look compared to full field courses, so 10 to 15 and 25 plus. So 10 to 15 and 25 plus. And look, 25 plus has a very low outlier here. 10 to 15, fairly consistent. This might actually be a high outlier. In fact, I apologize. I'm going to switch the view. We're going to go back to Fantasy National very, very quickly. I want to see putting in these prior leaderboards. So I apologize. We're going to come back to this very, very quickly. I do want to see this. Top 15. All right, so putting from 25 feet. You get 5 negative, but no one worse than a 1.5. 10 to 15 looks kind of hit and miss. If we sort, 3.9 is fairly high with a modicum of success, I suppose. 25 feet plus. Oh, wow, okay. Well, a few more miscuts high up here, but you also had much more in terms of upper leaderboard finishes. 2021, don't want to do too many years as we're already running over on time, but this was something that definitely caught my eye. I wanted to check. 10 to 15. Okay, yeah, look at this. 10 to 15. You have 4 players that are red, but 2 of them are 0. So they are just minuscule in terms of negative. So you really only have 2 players that are negative from 10 to 15 feet. If we sort on it, okay. You got some pretty good finishes in here. And a 3.5, you got a 2.7. Maybe 10 to 15 feet might be something. Breakdown. Let's go to... So 10 to 15 feet, you can just see that bar 16% here versus 14.2%. So more birdie putts do come from 10 to 15 feet. Okay. So that might be something that we want to take a look at very quickly. So your best putters on fast and lightning Bermuda greens from 10 to 15 feet since the start of 2022. And again, I'm changing the timeline just so we can get enough rounds for players. Your top performers on fast Bermuda greens from 10 to 15 feet. Dylan Fratelli, Doc Redman, Sung Kang, Alex Noren, Ben Taylor, Harry Hall, Martin Trainer, Christian Bezuidenhout, Peter Malnati, and Billy Horschel. All right. There we go. Might have some of that in my mixed condition model. So, but there's a look at PGA National in terms of raw data and compared to other full field courses. Before we go to the early look file, let's take a look at my mixed condition model from last year's Honda Classic, and it was not good. It was not good. I was very high on Joaquin Niemann off his win at the Genesis last year. He missed the cut. Aaron Wise, Matthew Wolff missed the cut. And I'm not a lot of high leaderboard success either. So my top 20, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 missed cuts. It's a little high. Generally, I like to try to be about 5 missed cuts. So it's a little high. And I only had 2 players that were inside the top 10 So a very poor mixed condition model last year, especially since the winner was all the way down at 99th in my rankings. So what did I use last year? I have 15% approach. That seems pretty plausible, as it's the most important shot type here. 15% in par 3s, 15% in par 4s. I'm generally in agreement. Par 3s are pretty important here. All right. I did go with 10% when it was difficult, so there's 10% of the mixed condition model I'm getting back. I went 10% in fast and lightning Bermuda greens. Again, I'm on that same track this year. 400, 450 par 4s is where I was at. I put 10% in that. I don't know if it warrants 10%. I did have 5% off the tee. I looked at both birdies and bogeys. I looked at greens, and I looked at a specific length of par 5, and the par 5s just don't matter here. So I think that's 5% I'm getting back there, and then 10% more I'm getting back at least here. So 15% I'm getting back in metrics that I'm not going to use, but really I'm kind of in the same spot, so I'm not feeling all that great. Let's see how they played out in predictive analytics. So these numbers here are if I were to sort the leaderboard for the top 28, I believe it was, again, just due to ties. So if I sorted that on the top 28, anything around 50 is pretty good. Once you get into the 40s, it's a pretty good predictor of success. 55 is mediocre. Anything above that starts to get pretty poor. Darnell, it's been a long time. Good to see you back in chat. Thanks for jumping in. Who am I liking this week? Well, at the beginning of this show, I revealed the 14 players that qualified under the research that I put forward in on social media this afternoon. I definitely fired off 2 or 3 of those names because I liked the pricing. With this field being so lackluster, I think it is a worthwhile gamble to take some shots this week, because you have 3 big names here, and that's about it. Shane Lowry, Sung Jae. You can maybe consider Cam Davis or Thomas Detry. But there's a lot of big prices on players that fit the criteria of former winners here. In fact, all 14 of the players that qualified under the metrics or criteria I put forward on social media, all 14 of them were 65 to 1 or better. At least at the time that I posted. I haven't seen the odds since this early afternoon, but I think this is a chance to really take some shots, and throw some darts, throw some bombs, if you will. Who am I liking specifically? It's kind of tough to say since I haven't made my mixed condition model. I'm trying to think of the players that really popped on a whole lot of metrics that aren't who you would think of. Sung Jae, Shane Lowry, Aaron Wise, they seemed to pop on everything. I'm going to have to go back and take a look at the field this week. Dylan Fratelli is somebody that I'm quite interested in. His number was very, very high. Detry, I think, is going to be pretty good in DFS. Don't think I would bet him outright. His number is pretty low. S.H. Kim is somebody that I've been looking at quite heavily. But when you get a chance, I would recommend you look and go back and look at the intro when I reveal the top or the 14 players that qualify under the metrics. Adrian Moronk, it's just hard for me. It's hard for me to back a player like that without having a whole lot of data. He's a very talented player, don't get me wrong. But when you don't have data, it's very, very hard for me to back him, especially since I'm, a statistical analyst. If you don't have stats, there's nothing to analyze. I'm going to be honest with you here on this one, Darnell. This is one I would defer to others in the industry that would be much more in tune with a player like Adrian Meronk. And I have no problem admitting when I don't know something. I'd rather admit that I don't know than to spout a bullshit answer at you. That's one where I would just I would defer to others in the industry and see what they think. Because I just don't know. I just don't know. I hate to give you that answer, but that is the answer. The player's very talented. That's what I have on him. He's very talented. What's he done lately? Actually, I brought him up and then I had exited his player page. What's he done lately? When he made the cut at the Genesis, I'm not really all that concerned with POA, especially because we're not on POA this week. He's played in very difficult events. He played the Open. He made the cut at the Open. Missed at the U.S. Open. I don't know. If you like the price, fire him up. I don't see any reason why not. He's a very talented player. Very talented player. But when a player doesn't have any statistics, it's hard for me to give something solid one way or the other. But coming back to my mixed condition model from last year, you see approach wasn't really all that predictive. The most predictive statistic was par threes, and that's where I'm kind of at again this year. Bogey avoidance was much higher, much better than birdies. That's why I'm thinking more so bogeys than birdies. Maybe last year was just an odd year for the Honda Classic. It did downpour in the final round, but nothing last year was very predictive at all. So, the par threes were the best. Greens were also pretty good, which are off your screen. Greens were second best, but a 59 is pretty bad. So the bogeys are more than the birdies. That's positive to see at least. So there's a look at my mixed condition model from last year. Again, it did not perform well. Just being frank, it did not perform well. Sadly, it looks like I'm on a lot of the same metrics. Maybe I need to alter the percentages. I'm also going to be using prior course form to go along with the analytics, so maybe that changes it up a little bit. But I don't see too much different other than the fact that I'm not going to be using strokes gained total, and I'm not going to be using the par fives, as the par fives just don't really matter here. So hopefully last year was just a weird year for the Honda. That's what I'm having to go with. So we'll move to the early look file. Again, this is the players that have played at PGA National the past 5 years, what they have done statistically at PGA National. There are quite a few metrics that I do want to look at. Let's take a look at approach first. Who has hit the irons their best here at the Honda Classic? Let me know if you want to do a friendly bet head-to-head. I'll tell you what, if you're wanting to do Meronk just for the fun of it, I will say he finishes outside the top 30. And I could be very, very wrong on that. But, looking at his statistics, like the approach was fine. Putting, he's been pretty bad, but it was all on POA, so it's hard to gauge. But I'll say he finishes outside the top 30. Let's see. You're leading Meronk versus one. Okay. I'll take S.H. Kim then. Moronk versus S.H. Kim. We'll go with that, and we'll figure out what's on the line here. But I like that. Straight up 1v1. All right, so your top performers in strokes gained approach the past 5 years here at PGA National: Cam Davis, Harry Higgs, Ben On, who's actually your top strokes gained total player the past 5 years here at PGA National. Let's see. Adams Vincent's played here a couple times. Aaron Wise. But you see, like, there's not a whole lot of upper end success for players that have played it multiple times. This course is so volatile with all the water. It's very hard to have sustained success here at PGA National. Let's look at your top putters on these greens here at PGA National. You've got Harris English is 3 for 3. Webb Simpson's 2 for 2. Bill Haas is 2 for 2. Mark Hubbard's 3 for 3. Martin Traynor has putt very well here, but he does not have a very good record here. Doc Redman's 0 for 2. Look, Denny McCarthy, he's 2 for 5 in making the cut. That's not anything I'd be excited about. Now, Alex Noren's 3 for 4. Okay. Chris Kirk's 3 for 5. Okay. Billy Horschel 3 for 4. So there's some of your top putters. Let's move on to a couple of different things. I want to look at greens, bogeys, par threes. So we'll take a look at greens. Your top greens in regulation gained players. Sepp Straka, your defending champion. Look at that. Top greens in regulation gained player in the field this week of the players who have played at Fantasy National. So giving me more credence to believe that greens in regulation is a metric I want to use. Danny Lee. Shane Lowry, 4 for 4s. Adams Vincent's played well here. Alex Noren, Ben On. Adam Shanks played fairly well here. Sung Jae. JT Poston. All right. We'll look at bogey avoidance. Your top bogey avoiders here at PGA National: Webb Simpson. You can see all the guys who have just played at one time. You just don't want to put a whole lot of stock into that. Shane Lowry, Sung Jae, Sepp Straka, Ben On, Cam Davis, Harris English. Jason Duffner's 4 for 5. Granted, not a lot of high finishes, but he is 4 for 5 for what it's worth. Mark Hubbard, Ryan Palmer, 3 for 4. Johnny Vegas is 5 for 5 here at PGA National. Interesting to see. All right, a couple more. I'm going to look at par threes, and then I want to look at proximity. So par threes in total, largest to smallest. Your top par three performers. Smotherman only one time and he missed the cut. Chappell. Webb Simpson. Aaron Wise. Alex Noren. Again, Denny McCarthy, but he's not played well here. Sepp Straka, your defending champion. Billy Horschel. Jason Duffner again. Ryan Palmer, Cam Davis. All right. These names seem to be overlapping quite a bit now. Finally, let's look at 175 to 200, since that is the most common approach shot here at PGA National. Adams Vincent. Harry Higgs has not been terrible at this event, 2 for 3. Shane Lowry. Aaron Wise. There's Sepp Straka again. Ryan Palmer's played fairly well. Webb Simpson, Ben On. Vaughn Taylor's 4 for 5. Granted, average finish is 65th, but 4 for 5 in making the cut. Cameron Davis, 3 for 3. Jimmy Walker. All right, so there's a look at some of the metrics that we saw tonight that seem to be the most important. I will sort this back on average finish for you all. So, I believe that is going to do it for the Data Dive show this evening. Let me go to to the beginning here for your strokes gained statistics. That is going to do it for the Data Dive show tonight. P and Darnell, it was great to see you in chat, especially Darnell. It's been a while. Hopefully you're able to come back more often now that football season's over. Basketball, while it is picking up towards playoff time, it's also getting to be golf season. And then baseball's rolling right around the corner as well. But it's good to see both of you all in chat. Thanks to both of you and to everyone else out there who supports the channel by liking the videos, subscribing to the channel, commenting in the videos. I always appreciate it. Reminder that on Monday mornings I am live over on Twitch doing a lot of intense research, and Friday evenings I am doing showdown content. Friday night at 9 p.m. Eastern. It was a blast this past Friday. We had quite a bit of interaction. A lot of people showed up. Very grateful for that. So I'm hoping to continue to build the Friday night streams as well as we build weekend and showdown lineups on Friday evenings. But thanks to everyone who supports the channel and tuned in this evening for all of the wagers that you have made so far this week for the Honda Classic, for all of the wagers you're thinking about making for this week for the Honda Classic. Until I see you Wednesday night for the DFS Tactics show, may all your bets be profitable.